heavyweights events didn't really evolve until 1973 on a formal basis. Prior to that, athletes came out of the crowd and took part in a caber toss, and one of the early caber tossers from our area was Lloyd Kennedy.
Well, Lloyd Kennedy, he was probably the best teacher for the caber, because he just taught. He was really good at it. He threw for years in Maxwell, and I threw for distance, not for accuracy. But he said if you can't pick it up cleanly and run with it, you'll never throw it. How to balance it on your shoulder, take it off your shoulder, and just keep it perfectly straight up and down. And then eventually put it back on your shoulder, and then all of a sudden he'd tell you to run with it, and then try and throw it. He was just he was very good at it, and knew how to make you understand how to do it and how important the balance and the technique was. It just wasn't brute power.
Lloyd Kennedy, he's the guy that taught me how to toss a caber. He had done it for years and years here. Dr. Senecal from Alexandria, he's supported us, and he gave us a place to throw.
Doug Fales used to throw with us too. Now Doug was our kind of our statistician. He knew everything about, if some guy in Timbuktu did something, Doug would know about it.
Well, Ronnie Johnny Peters, everybody knew him. He probably was right after Lloyd, when they still threw for distance at Maxwell for many's a year, and we'd even go down to his farm if we couldn't work at Senecal's in Alexandria. And he had a couple of cabers cut there, and he had various sizes of cabers to match what you could do. If you couldn't pick up a heavy caber, he wouldn't let you. He'd keep you on a smaller caber till you could master the technique of it, and then give you a little bigger caber, and you went from there. So
we had a little club called the Cabers of Glengarry. Ron was instrumental in getting that going. Doug Fales from Montreal, he was a commercial artist. He helped push that.
We'd have our little meets at the fall at Glengarry, and then springtime we'd have a little meet in Williamstown. We'd all kind of get up and get going down there, and just gave us a good, okay, let's get going, get ready for Maxwell, and whatever other games people were going to throughout the summer.
In 1973, we through Doug Fales and Dave Harrington, we put together what we called the World Invitational Scottish Heavyweights Championship, and it became a formal competition from that year on.
Well, I'd say the most influential person for getting the games, the heavy events on track here, would be Dave Harrington. He was a world-class athlete, a trained athlete, and he pushed quite hard, to get the events on the infield. At first, we weren't allowed on the infield because there was no room.
He was good to coach too. He just had a little more experience and expertise in throwing the weights and throwing the hammers that you had to have eventually. He just knew how to promote it, and he enjoyed it, and he was keen on it being a sport, just not a cultural event. I think it was what it boiled down to with him. So.
Well, the heavyweights grew tremendously, especially when we started bringing in athletes from other parts of the world. It was Alistair Gunn, who was probably the most prominent one from Scotland, and Alistair was probably the smallest competitor we ever had, but he had the most spectacular technique, even to the point where he taught Robin Thompson his technique in throwing the sheaf, and the next year Robin broke a world record using the technique that he had been taught by Alistair Gunn.
And so I adopted this technique, and I kind of got in the door a little quicker than everybody else. I figured it out by practicing, and so my sheath toss took off quite well. And then when some of the big boys figured out how to do it, that's when they were able to break the record that I set. And so it was quite exciting for me to do that, because on the whole, I was just an average thrower.
My probably best highlight was with Maxwell, and we had two cabers, and we turned the competitive caber, and then moved the challenge caber, and Dave Harrington was the only guy to turn the challenge caber. It was around 22 feet, if I remember correctly. And then they cut a foot off to let the next 5 or 6 guys have a chance at it, because they had to get first on down to 8th like that. And I was fortunate enough to put in a good throw, and I wound up second to Dave. But it was kind of neat to hear your voice, and Williamstown here in Glengarry County, echoing kind of against the grandstand like that, and that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, type of thing.
So some of my favorite memories are competing with your peers, and getting sometimes getting the best of them, and improving your own points, and getting better yourself, and of course not getting hurt.
It was kind of a sport you'll never see that they share any kind of input. If you had a question, somebody would give you an answer to help you. It was but nobody seemed to think you're going to get better or something like that. They weren't worried about it. It's not what you would call a real popular sport, like a football or hockey, where there's thousands of players. This is one time I think there was maybe 50 in North America guys throwing regularly.
But it's a good friendly atmosphere. Everybody like to see everybody do good, but you still want to win.
In the years that we competed, if we made enough money to pay our gas and maybe have a hamburger, we were satisfied. And so it was more for the love of the sport, more for the camaraderie of all the people, and we always had a good time.
Oh, excellent memories. If you had to do it all again, you do it all again, and maybe start a little earlier than I did, but it was good. It was a lot of fun.
I took over the heavy events chairmanship from Miles McMillan probably about 15 years ago.
Oh, Roddy has really taken on a major load. Our heavyweights competition has expanded to the point, under his tutelage, to the point where we have masters competition for some of the older time fellows, to the ladies heavyweights competition, to junior heavyweights, and a lot of that has to be attributed to Roddy.
Well, I think Roddy McLeod, he's just a good guy. I hate to say that, but just a good guy. Various places would call him to put on a little demonstration. He had no problem calling guys to come and give him a hand, and then whenever he was, kind of finished competing, he was the first guy to jump on board to say, "I'll help." And
Roddy McLeod, fantastic guy. Another quiet man, but when it push comes to shove, he's the guy you want in your boat. So.
Well, I have a grandson that he'd like to think he was going to be top dog here once in a few years, but we'll see. We have a good group of the youngsters coming up. They're juniors, we call them, from 13 to 16. There's Lyndon McNaughton looks after that. What I'm proud of is how the games have come along. I got a good bunch of volunteers that are helping me, and Tammy McSwain and Connie Hergebies and Billy Knox. He's the judge, and he's from Fort Erie. We'd be lost without him, and Connie and Tammy as well. Well, as far as I'm concerned, the athletics are only one part of it. The games wouldn't be the same without the dancers, without the bands, without the fiddlers, without the heavy events. Even the concessions, they all lend an atmosphere of camaraderie and togetherness. And then, of course, you've got the bagpipes with the mass bands at noon and at the 6 o'clock there. It all comes together. It's all just one big happy family sort of thing, but it all comes together.